Hello and welcome to the video Spring Boot Connect to Oracle Database with me Nam Habing from CodeJava.net. Through this video, I will guide you how to write Java code that connects to Oracle Database Server in a Spring Boot application with JdbcTemplate and connect to a local instance of Oracle Database and using Spring Boot with Spring Data JPA to connect to a remote instance of Oracle Database Server. And I suppose that you are using the following software programs: Java Development Kit, JDK, Spring Tool Suite IDE, STS, Oracle Express Database Server, and Oracle SQL Developer tool. And here are the configuration steps which you need to follow in order to have a Spring Boot application connect to Oracle database. First, you need to declare some required dependencies. If you want to use JdbcTemplate, you need to declare the dependency for Spring Boot JDBC. And in case you want to use Spring Data JPA, you need to declare the dependency for Spring Data JPA. And the most important dependency is the Oracle JDBC driver that allows Java applications to connect to Oracle database server. And then you need to specify data source properties or connection properties to the database. This is the Oracle SQL Developer tool, a visual tool that allows us to manage Oracle databases locally or remotely. Let me connect to a local instance of Oracle Express database server. So here you see I already created a connection here, and I will connect using a username and password. Okay, you see I have connected to this Oracle Express database server, and I can see all the tables in the Axie database here. And in the next few minutes, I will show you how to code a Spring Boot project that connects to this Oracle database server and retrieve data in the students table here. Let me open this table to see the data. And you can see there are two rows in this students table here with three columns: ID, name, and email. And this is Spring Boot to Suite IDE. And let me create the first Spring Boot project. So go to menu File, New, Spring Starter project here, and enter the project name as Spring JDBC Template to Oracle demo connecting to Oracle database with JDBC template. Click next, and in order to connect to Oracle database, you need to specify two dependencies. And the first one is JDBC API, and the second one is Oracle driver here. So there are two dependencies, JDBC API and Oracle driver, and click finish, and it will create the project. Okay, let's open the Maven project file pom.xml here, and you can see the dependency Spring Boot starter JDBC here, and the JDBC driver for Oracle here, JDBC version 8 here, and Spring Boot starter is included. Spring Boot starter test is included by default. And under the Maven dependency section, you can see the jar files. This is the jar file for Oracle JDBC driver, you see, and the jar file for Spring Boot JDBC. Here you see. And next, you need to specify data source property in the Spring Boot application configuration file. the application.properties file here, and we need to declare the three properties for data source, that spring.datasource.url. This is a JDBC URL. For connecting to Oracle database, we need to use this JDBC URL, JDBC Oracle and we use the teen driver. This is a most popular Oracle driver type, Oracle teen driver. Add sign and then the host name of the Oracle database server. Because we are going to connect locally, so I use the localhost, and the port number of Oracle Express database server default port number is 1521 and colon, and then the database name is axi here, and then we need to declare the data source property for the username system, and then we need to declare the property for password. Okay, so these are the three required properties we need to declare for data source. And then update the main class generated here. This is a Spring Boot application, as you can see, and I want to run it as a standalone console program, so I implement the command line runner interface here, and override the run method here, and put the code that using JdbcTemplate to retrieve data from students table here. And to use JdbcTemplate, we need to declare a reference to JdbcTemplate here. JdbcTemplate is the JDBC API provided by Spring Boot that allows the programmer to connect to relational databases based on JDBC. So we need to have this field auto-while by Spring Framework, and then in the run method here we can execute a SQL statement. I want to select all rows from the students table. Select asterisk from students. The table name is students. Here you see. The JdbcTemplate API provides very simple ways to connect to working with database. For example, here I want to execute a query, JdbcTemplate query for a given SQL statement, and I want to use a row mapper to map a Java object to this table in the database. So I create a new domain model class or entity class student with the fields ID, name, and email, same as column names in the students table, and generate the getter and setter methods. Select generate, and also generate the toString method, so we can print the details of each student object. Okay, generate, reformat the code. Okay, this is a domain model class, and using JdbcTemplate API we can specify a pin property row mapper here, new instance for the given entity class student dot class, and it will return a list of domain model objects, as you can see here, students. And then from the list collection here, we can use for each statement with a lambda expression to bring the detail of each student object in this list collection. System inline this here functional interface. Okay, that's it. Very simple. And now we are ready to run this Spring Boot console program using JdbcTemplate to connect to Oracle database server and select all rows from the students table. Now run this application, run as Java application. We got an error here. And let's see. We have something wrong in the JDBC URL. Sorry, I forgot to place a colon here. So after the driver type is teen, you need to have a colon before the host name here. Now I'll run the program again. You see now it successfully connected to Oracle Express database and it prints 3 students here. You see with ID 1, ID 2, ID 21 here. Exactly what we have seen in the Oracle developer tool here. You see 3 student names, Namaming Jondo and Jane Rusty here. Perfect, right? Tells us how to connect to Oracle database server in a Spring Boot project using JdbcTemplate. Now I'm going to connect to a remote instance of Oracle Express database server. So here I create a new connection and I give either name as remote Oracle. And the host name, I can choose the IP address 192.168.1.6. This is the IP address of the remote computer username. Connect. Okay, you see, I connected to a remote instance of Oracle Express database server, and I can see all the tables in the database. Yeah. And let's see the data in the table customers here. And you can see there's only one customer here. Okay. And now in Spring Boot, in Spring Tools ID here, we create a second project, new Spring Starter project. Enter the project name as Spring Data JPA to Oracle. Demo connecting to Oracle database with Spring Data JPA. JPA and Hibernate framework. And you need to choose a dependency. Oracle driver is must, and then the dependency for Spring Data JPA. You can search for Spring Data JPA here. And finish. Okay, here we go. The second project got created here. Let's see the Maven project file. You can see the dependencies Spring Boot Starter Data JPA, Oracle JDBC driver, and Spring Boot Starter test. And in the Maven dependencies section here, you can see the jar files or Spring Boot Starter Data JPA and Oracle JDBC driver here. Oracle JDBC driver version 8. And then we need to specify the data source properties, JDBC URL, username and password to connect to the Oracle database. Spring data source .url is JDBC Oracle teen driver SI and IP address of the remote server 192.168 by 1.6, port number 1521, and database name XC, and username. Spring data source username here, system, and password. Okay, and then we need to create an entity class that maps to the students to the customers table in this database. And because by default Spring Data JPA uses Hibernate framework, and so you can see the jar files for Hibernate here, Hibernate core here. Hibernate is an implementation of JPA, you know. So I create a new entity class here, customer. Yeah, we need to use some annotation to annotate this class here, table, and we need to specify the table name customers, and then the fields that corresponding to the columns in the table here, customer ID, name and email, private long ID. And because this is primary key field, so we need to use the ID annotation and generated value annotation with the strategy is generation type identity to tell Hybrid framework that the values of this field will be generated automatically by the database, and we need to specify the column name because the column name in the database is different than the field name customer underscore ID, as you can see here. And then the fields for name and email, name and email. These fields have the same name as the column names, so we don't need to use any annotation. And then generate the getter and setter methods. Select all, generate, and also generate the toString method to print the details of each customer. Okay, that's for the entity class. And next, we need to declare a repository interface to be used with Spring Data JPA customer repository. And we need to have this interface extends the super interface JPA repository. Yeah, with the type of the entity class is customer and type of the ID field is long. As you can see, the type of the ID field in the customer class is long here. Okay, that's for the repository interface. Quite simple, right? And let me modify the code of the main class Spring Boot application here. I want to run it as the console application, so I have this class implements the interface command line run the override the run method here and put the code here. And to use Spring Data JPA, we need to declare a reference to the repository here. Sorry, I need to change the name of the repository interface here. Customer repository. So here in the main class, we need to have a reference to the customer repository, customer report, and have Spring Framework automatically inject an instance of this field. So we need to use the annotation auto-while here. And then in the run method, we can use the customer repo here. And you can see there are various methods that allows us to working with the database. Here, I want to retrieve all the information from the customers table, so I can use the find all method here. These customers. Yeah. So you can see Spring Data JPA makes it extremely simple to working with database. This customer for each with a lambda expression to print out the detail of each customer object in the collection. Okay, so you see the code is very simple. First, you need to declare some properties for the data source, and then entity class and the repository interface. And now write the code. Now let me run this Spring Boot application. Run this Java application. And you can see it takes quite a long time to connect to the remote instance of Oracle database, and finally it prints the detail of the customer here, named Alexander here, exactly what we see in the database here, customer Alexander here. I can insert a new row here. Nam Minh Nam and code Java.net and commit the change. Okay, and run the application again. You see, it is connecting to Oracle database remotely, so it runs a little bit slow. You see, finally it prints two customers here, Alexander and Namamin here. Perfect, right? And you can notice that when using Spring Data JPA, the program doesn't terminate; it's still running. You can see the red light here. So we need to terminate manually here. So with this console program, we should exit the program explicitly like this. And with Spring Data JPA, you don't have to be worried about managing database connections. And in the console field, we can see it prints some useful information about Hibernate and database dialect. You can see Hibernate using the database dialect Oracle 12C dialect here. And besides the required properties, URL, username and password, you can also specify some additional properties. For example, to show the SQL statements, format the SQL statement, and choose a specific database dialect. Now, let me show you spring.jpa.show SQL here equal to to show the SQL statement in the console view. And also with Hibernate framework, you can use this property Spring JPA properties Hibernate format SQL equal to let Hibernate framework format the SQL statements. And the next property you can use is to specify a specific dialect class here. Properties.hibernate.dialect, and you can see the default database dialect is this class here. To see all the available dialect classes, you can look at the jar file of Hibernate framework here. And let me show you Hibernate core here. Look at the package Hibernate dialect. You see here, and you see there are many classes for database dialect for various databases here. And for Oracle, you can see the database dialect here, version 10G, 12G here. Now I want to use the dialect version 10G. So I update the property here, Oracle 10G dialect, and run the program again. And you can see in the console view, it prints the SQL select statement in a formatted form here, nicely, right? Yeah, you see select columns from the customers table here, and you can see there are 2 customers printed here. And you also can see that now Hibernate is using the dialect class for Oracle 10G dialect here, exactly what we specified in the properties file here. So far you have learned how to connect to Oracle database server in a Spring Boot application with JDBC and Spring Data JPA. I hope you have found this video helpful. Please subscribe to my channel, like, comment and share this video. Thanks for watching.